Please be seated. Go back a second.
All right, Mr. Lally, your next witness, please.
May we approach before the next witness is called, Your Honor?
All right, so Mr. Lally, who's your next witness?
Call Miss Julie Albert to the stand.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Julie Albert, Albert.
And where do you live now?
I live at 22 Maple Street in Canton.
And how long have you lived there?
A little over 2 years.
And how long in total have you lived in Canton?
My whole life. 48 years.
And where did you live just prior to living on Maple?
I lived at 7 Meadows Avenue in Canton.
And how long a period of time did you live at 7 Meadows Avenue?
Oh, 15 plus 20 years, maybe about 20 years.
And do you have kids?
Yes, I have 3 boys.
And are you married?
Yes, I am.
What's your husband's name?
Christopher Albert.
And your 3 boys, how old?
My oldest, Christopher, is 25. My second son, Colin, is 20. And my youngest son, Dylan, is 16.
And do each of them, where do they live? Do they live with you?
They all live with me, yes.
And your husband does some work?
Yes,
What does he do?
he owns a restaurant in Canton,
What's the name of the restaurant?
D&E Pizza,
And where is that located?
618 Washington Street.
Now, when you lived on Meadows Avenue, can you describe for the jury, if you know, about how many houses are on Meadows?
I would say maybe 8 on each side.
And Meadows comes out to a main road, is that correct?
Yes, Pleasant Street.
And while you were living on Meadows Avenue, did you have occasion to come to know someone by the name of John O'Keefe?
Yes, I did.
And where did John live in relation to you?
John's house was at the top of the street, and there's 2 houses. There was 2 houses between John's house and my house.
And if you recall, about how long did you know John O'Keefe, or when did he move into Meadows?
I think he moved in 2017-ish, maybe. And I've probably known him since maybe 2019.
And how would you describe sort of your relationship with John?
We were friendly. We were neighbors. I'd see him all the time coming in and out of the street, and because he's at the top of the street when I pulled out of the street. And we were friendly.
And in addition to you knowing Mr. O'Keefe, were there other sort of people that also knew him?
Yes.
Who were some of those people?
Well, I knew John through Jennifer McCabe.
And who is Jennifer McCabe?
She's one of my closest friends.
Now, you knew that John had 2 children that he was guardian for?
Yes.
You were familiar with both his niece and his nephew?
Yes.
Now, at some point through Mr. O'Keefe, did you come to know somebody by the name of Karen Read?
Yes.
When about was it that you met Ms. Read?
Maybe in 2021, pulling in and out of the street if they were outside, if a couple times out socially, probably in 2021, I would say.
And if you could, just so we're clear, do you see Ms. Read in the courtroom?
Yes. Between her lawyers right over there.
Now, on some social occasions that you were talking about, when you would see them out, you have occasion to socially interact with Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Read.
Yes.
That's something that like, when your husband did together, or was it more?
No, a group setting.
And with reference to, did you have occasions where you would socially hang out or interact with Mr. O'Keefe in which Ms. Read wasn't there?
I can only honestly remember one time, and that was, I don't even know if they were together at the time.
And had you ever socially interacted or spent time with Ms. Read separate and apart from Mr. O'Keefe?
No.
Now, if I could turn your attention to January 28th, do you recall that day?
Yes.
Do you recall what day of the week it was?
Um,
And anything did you have for that particular evening?
Next day was my nephew's birthday. So we were a bunch of us were going to go out that night, before to, bar in Canton.
By the night before his birthday?
Yes.
And that nephew's name?
Brian Jr.
And if you know about how old was he turning, or how, let me start with this, how old is he now?
24.
So just turned 24 a few months ago?
January. Yep.
And so he would have been turning, what, 22 at that point?
Yes.
You say we had plans to sort of, who's,
His mother, Nicole, my niece, Caitlin, and a couple of Brian's friends.
now, and you mean Brian Jr.'s friends?
Yes.
And so Brian Albert Jr. has a mother named Nicole Albert, is that correct?
Yes.
And how is she related to you?
She's my sister-in-law. Our husbands are brothers.
So your husband Christopher has a brother?
Brian
Brian,
Sr.
for lack of a better term. Husband Christopher, how many siblings does he have?
6.
And Brian is the oldest?
Oldest, yes.
And so there were plans to go out that evening, the day before Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday, correct?
Yes.
And what were the plans? What did they sort of consist
We were just going to go to Waterfall.
of? Is Waterfalls,
It's bar in Canton on Washington Street.
And from your husband's pizza shop at D&E to Waterfall, about how far away are the two from each other?
Close. I mean, steps maybe. You can Very, very close.
Same side of the street or
No, opposite sides.
Now, when it came to that day, where did you go? Did you go to the waterfall first or somewhere else? Or
I went to my sister-in-law Nicole's house to pick her up.
and you know where your sister-in-law and your brother-in-law lived?
34 Fairview, where they lived, 34 Fairview Road.
That was somewhere that you had been numerous occasions before.
Yes.
And when you arrived at Fairview Road, inside the house,
I think I went inside for a moment, yeah, to wait.
and you know who anyone did you see in there that you knew or recognized or didn't?
My niece Caitlin was in there, my nephew Brian. I don't recall who else was in there. Yeah, she was ready to leave. Yep,
And when you left, I'm
Mhm.
sort of in the plural. So you drove, is that correct?
I drove. Yep.
And anyone went along with you in your car?
My sister-in-law and Caitlin, my niece, and Brian did not end up coming with us.
And so your nephew Brian, for whom you had initially made the plans to go out
Yep.
to celebrate, didn't end up coming.
Correct.
And why was that?
I don't think he was feeling up to it.
And if you know about what time was it that you picked your sister-in-law and your niece up and then went to work?
I don't remember exactly, but I would probably say between maybe 7:30 and 8, 7:30, like 7:30 maybe.
And you arrive at the waterfall, you go in.
Mhm.
If you could just explain for the jury, sort of walk into the door of the waterfall, where was it that the three of you went?
When you walk into the door, there's a couple high top tables in front of you, and we just sat down at a high top table right when you walk through the door.
Now, from your experience either that evening or prior evenings, on certain nights, does the waterfall have any kind of entertainment?
Yeah, they always have, it's different. They have bands.
And from your recollection, was there a band there that night?
Yes, there was.
And do you recall where you were seated in relation to the band?
I was sitting at the end of the high top table closest to the door that you walk in, and the band was to the right of me against a wall and kind of like an alcove, like a little against the wall.
And when you went there, was the band already sort of up and playing, or did that happen later?
I think they set up while we were there. I think.
And so initially, when you go there, do you go there and just have drinks, or did you eat something, or what?
We ate, and yeah.
While you were there, as far as sort of the meal portion of it, was there anyone else that joined you?
I know my boyfriend, Tristan Morris, came. I don't remember exactly when it was during that, but I know he was there. And then during the meal part, I don't think during the meal part anyone else, I don't think.
So you recall, as far as the meal part was concerned, it's you, your sister-in-law Nicole, your niece Caitlin, and her boyfriend Tristan.
Correct.
And Morris, did he stay for any extended period of time, or when was it that he left?
I know he stayed for a little bit, but I honestly can't remember what time exactly he left.
Now, your husband, was he working on that day?
Yes, he was.
And had you been in communication with him as to where you were going to be?
Yes,
And so the plan was basically for him to meet you at the waterfall when he was done with work.
correct, yes.
And if you know about what time was it that your husband, Christopher, came over to the waterfall?
Maybe not 9:30, 10, maybe. I don't
And
remember
want you to
exactly.
guess, just,
Yeah.
You know, time around 9:30 or so, your husband, Christopher, comes over to the waterfall?
Yes,
And what things did he do when he got there? Let me ask
came
you,
in, yeah.
Came in, did he get anything to eat, anything to drink?
Yeah, he probably ordered a drink and just stood by the table, I would think.
And the people in your group, were you drinking that night?
Yes.
Do you recall specifically what you had to drink?
Go ahead, just a couple glasses of wine.
And do you recall specifically what he had that night?
What he would drink is Miller Lite.
And that's sort of typically what he would drink when he
Yes.
was out?
Yes.
And your sister-in-law, Nicole, recall what she was drinking?
I would assume White Claw.
And same question with regard to your niece, Kate.
Yes, probably White Claw as well.
Now, while you were there, who, if any, after your husband came in,
Mhm.
who, if anyone else, sort of came in and joined the group that you were with?
My brother-in-law, Brian Albert, and his friend, Brian Higgins.
And obviously, you know brother-in-law Brian Albert, correct?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
thank you. Just have to answer obviously. So, did you know Mr. Higgins as well?
Yes,
And how did you know Mr. Higgins?
I just know him from being friends with my brother-in-law.
So you knew him just sort of through your brother-in-law Brian, is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And you know when they arrived in relation to when your husband Christopher arrived?
I don't recall.
At some point after, correct?
Yes.
Then after arrived, if anyone else do you recall sort of arriving and joining in your group?
McCabe and Matt McCabe. And there was a couple, don't even know their name, Colakitis. They arrived. I don't know their first names. John and Karen arrived shortly after that.
And just so we can clear up people, as far as Jennifer McCabe, you've already mentioned her, and Matthew, was that her husband?
Yes.
And the other couple that you were talking about are sort of their names. Had you ever met them before?
No. Nope.
Anybody that you're particularly friends with or anything like that?
No. I know them, who they are from seeing them maybe at a sporting event or something. Never been introduced to them.
And when you say sort of sporting events in relation to individual,
If they were at like a basketball game and I was at a game, like seeing them around, I'm assuming probably sporting events, probably a basketball game.
I'm sure it's pretty well understood with this. I just want to clarify. So when you say sporting events, these are kids.
Sporting events, yes.
And so which kids' sporting events would you be at that you would see this couple that you didn't know?
Kids
Kids or something?
from the Cape's kids.
So you would go to sporting events with Jennifer McCabe's kids and see this couple.
Yes.
And you know about how long after this Albert and Mr. Higgins arrived, Cabe's and this other couple arrived?
I don't remember
But
exactly.
after Mr. Albert and Mr. Higgins, correct? Now then you mentioned Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed came in at some point as well?
So you
And-
have to make sure you say yes or no, okay? The other thing you say, I assume or I guess, don't answer. You don't know either.
If you know, about what time was it that Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed came?
Before 11 o'clock?
And with reference to when Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed came into the waterfall, where were you in relation to sort of high top table that you were describing?
I was at the top of the high top table closest to the door.
And when they came in, where did Mr. O'Keefe and the defendant go?
John walked in and said hello and kept on walking, I think, to the bar. And Karen came in and stopped at the table to talk for a minute.
And during the time that she stopped at the table to talk for a minute, what anything did she do?
She opened her jacket and had a glass and pulled the glass out and started drinking the drink.
And as far as the drink in the glass, what if anything did you observe as far as color or anything? Like that?
Clear.
And glass that she had, could you see, so the clear liquid inside it, how much of the glass was full of that?
I don't recall.
And she placed it on the table, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was your reaction to that?
I think I laughed and made a comment like easy or something because she walked in with the glass.
Did you know where Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed had been coming from prior to them getting to the waterfall?
Yes.
And where were they coming from?
CF McCarthy's.
You're familiar with that establishment?
Yes.
And where is that in relation to the waterfall?
Maybe 200 steps right next to my husband's restaurant.
So
Side.
on the same side of Washington Street as your husband's restaurant?
Yes.
Okay. In the same vicinity from D&E to Waterfall, CF McCarthy?
Yes.
Now, over the course of the evening, did you have occasion to see Mr. O'Keefe? He was at a bar, he had something to drink, is that correct?
Can you repeat that?
Over the course of the evening, did you have occasion to observe what do you think Mr. O'Keefe was?
No, I don't believe. I left very shortly after they got there.
And so you left fairly shortly after they arrived?
Yes.
Okay. And if you know about how much time are we talking?
Maybe 10, 15 minutes.
And why is it that you left?
I had a terrible migraine.
From the van being so close?
Yes.
And when you left, where did you go?
Home.
And when you got home, as far as your children on that evening,
Mhm.
who was home, who was out? If you know?
My youngest son was home and my oldest son didn't live at home. He lived in California at the time. And my middle son was not home.
And so your oldest son, Christopher, he
He
was,
was in the Navy and he was stationed in San Diego. Yes.
and so your middle son, Colin, he was out. Did you know where he was?
Yes. He was at, I believe, his friend Michael Leonetti's house.
And at some point, did you learn that Colin had gone from that person's house to somewhere else?
Yes.
Is this him communicating with you?
Yes.
And that other place that he went to,
Hey, man, the beer is the destination. That time.
I can take you back to the waterfall just for a
Mhm.
second. So while you were at the waterfall, obviously you see Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed come in. Do you recall what Mr. O'Keefe was wearing?
I know he had a hat on. He had jeans on and he had something with a hood.
And from your observations, did you ever see him with like a winter coat or jacket or anything like that?
I did not.
And with regard to the clothing that you observed him wearing, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the condition of that clothing? And torn, was it disheveled, anything like that?
No, nothing that I remember.
And with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, as far as his appearance, what, if anything, did you observe about him as far as injuries or anything?
Nothing.
Now, with reference to your group as far as at the waterfall, how would you describe sort of overall demeanor or tone of the group and what was going on then?
Just normal. I thought it was just normal. Sitting listening to a band.
At least during the time that you were there were no sort of arguments or disagreements or anything like that?
Nope. Nothing.
And specifically to Mr. O'Keefe and the defendant, Ms. Reed,
Mhm.
while you were there, during the short time that you were there, when they were there, did you observe anything as far as any arguments or disagreements or anything like that?
No, I did not.
Now, at the time, so during that time between when they arrived, you mentioned that John went up to the bar, correct?
Yes.
And where did the defendant go?
She talked to me at the top of the table for a few minutes, and then I believe she made her way down the table to either Jennifer McCabe or the couple that was at the end of the table to speak with.
And was it during that period of time that you had enough of the migraine and went home?
Yes, I left very, very early after that.
Now, during the time that you were there and you were speaking with the defendant down sort of your end of the table, what, if anything, was discussed as far as where to go, what to do after the work?
You know that I do remember, I'm sorry, that Karen had asked if we could go back to D&E, my husband's store, and make pizza, because that's something we frequently do if we're out at the end of the night, if we're hungry.
And was that something that you had discussed with Ms. Read either on that date or on a prior day?
I believe that's just that we went there once, and she said next time she'll have to come with us.
And was that something that was discussed as a possibility or something that was going to happen that night?
I think right away, I just wasn't going to do that because I wasn't feeling well. And I think I might have said, talk to Chris, because I wasn't going to do it.
And is that something that she mentioned over the course of that evening once, more than once, or something?
Just once to me.
So when you get home, at some point, the rest of your family came home at some point in the evening, correct?
Yes,
And came home first. Your husband Christopher or your son Colin?
my husband.
You know what time that was?
I want to say about after 12, maybe around there,
So sometime
around 12:10. Yes.
And what do you recall specifically about when your husband Christopher came?
He came upstairs to my room. He was shivering because it was cold out, and he immediately went to the bathroom, got undressed, and got into bed.
And your son Colin?
Yes.
And about how long was it after your husband came home that your son Colin?
15 minutes.
And you essentially waiting up for him?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Is that sort of common practice?
Yes. I do not go to bed until my kids are home.
And is there another common practice as far as when your kids come home, where do they go when they first come in?
They immediately will always come in the door, maybe grab a water out of the fridge and come upstairs and give me a kiss goodnight and tell me that they're home.
Now, did that happen on this occasion?
Yes.
And so Colin came into your room at some point?
He came right upstairs. Yes.
And when Colin came into your room and came upstairs, did you have occasion to observe him as far as talk to him? Obviously?
Yes, we talked for a minute. He asked me if I was feeling better. Talked for a moment.
And during that conversation that you had with Colin, same similar to what I had asked you with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, what injuries or anything did you observe on your son Colin?
None.
And fair to say the next day at some point you talked to and had interaction with your son?
Yes.
And what, if any, injuries or anything did you observe?
None.
So I know this is sort of hard, so wait till Mr. Lally finishes his question.
Okay.
Answering, okay?
Now, after your son Colin came home, eventually went to bed, is that right?
Yes.
And for attention to the next morning, Saturday morning on the 29th, about what time was it that you woke up?
I woke up about 8-ish.
And with regard to your nephew, Brian Jr., whose birthday it was now on the 29th, what, if any, sort of tradition do you have with respect to him this birthday?
Every year on his birthday, I go to Dunkin' Donuts. I get him 6 donuts and I bring them to the house and I leave them there with a card before he gets up. So when he wakes up, they're there. I've been doing it for years.
And is that what your intention was on this morning as well?
Yes.
And is that what you did on that?
Yes.
Now, when you woke up, probably like most people, at some point did you look at your phone?
Yes.
And when you looked at the screen to your phone, what, if anything, did you see?
I had a missed call from my friend Jen McCabe.
And was there any sort of indication in regard to the missed call as to what time that missed call had come in?
It was 5:55 maybe.
So sometime early
Morning, yes.
And beyond the missed call, was there any other sort of stamp or notification on the phone as far as a voicemail, text message?
Nope. I'm sorry. No, there was not.
Not from Ms. McCabe, correct? And not from anybody else?
Correct.
And at any point in time on that morning over the phone, did you speak with Ms. McCabe?
No, I did not.
And did you call her? So you didn't call her back or anything like that?
I did not.
And so after you wake up, at some point you go to Dunkin' Donuts and get the 6 donuts?
Yes.
And where did you go with those?
I drove to 34 Fairview.
And when you arrived at 34 Fairview, where did you park in relation to the house?
I pulled into the driveway.
And when you came up to the house and you were driving to the house, at this point it was weather like this.
It was coming down. The snow was coming down pretty good.
And with reference to the house, what anything did you notice out of the ordinary with regard to the house or the street or anything else?
Jenna McCabe's car was in the driveway.
And as far as any other vehicles on the street or anything like that, what was going on at that point?
I don't.
Nothing you can recall?
No.
Well, what time was this that you got there?
9 o'clock, 8:30.
And when you get there, you pull in the driveway, what did you do?
I opened my car door. I got out to walk to the car in front of me to leave the donuts and card inside my nephew Brian's car. And Brian Albert came to the door. Brian Albert Sr. came to the door and he told me to come in, asked me to come in for a second. And I said that I didn't need to. And he said, I'm just leaving this gift for Brian Jr. And he said, no, just come in for a second. So I went into the house.
And when you walk into 34 Fairview Road on that morning, who was anyone else was there?
Nicole Albert, Brian Higgins, Jennifer McCabe, and Matt McCabe
And where were they in relation to the house?
in the kitchen.
And anything did they tell you at that time?
When I first walked in, nothing. Everyone was just sitting there and I was looking around and everyone was visibly upset. And I asked, what's going on? And another maybe 30 seconds went by and Jen said, something's happened to John. And I said, John, she said, John O'Keefe. And I said, is he okay?
Objection.
No, I'm going to allow it.
I said, is he okay? And she said, we don't know. And that was that.
And after hearing that information, how long were you at your brother and sister-in-law's house?
Probably about half hour, 45 minutes, maybe.
And to go from there.
I went home to wake my husband up to let him know what had happened.
And at some point after you go home and wake up your husband, where did you and your husband go?
We went back to I woke up my husband, told him what had happened, and we went back to Fairview.
And so the second time that you had gone back to Fairview,
Mhm.
how long a period of time were you there that?
I would say probably half hour, not long.
And then after that half hour or so, where'd you go after that?
Back home to my house.
During either of those occasions when you were at 34 Fairview Road on the morning of the 29th, you had occasion to talk and observe Brian Albert Sr., correct?
Yes.
And similar to the questions that I asked with regard to Mr. O'Keefe and your son Colin, if any injuries or anything out of place did you note with respect to Brian Albert Sr.?
Nothing that I saw.
Same question with respect to Mr. Higgins, as far as you made observations and spoke at least in the same room as him on that morning?
Yes.
And what anything did you observe as far as injuries or anything else on Mr. Higgins?
Nothing.
Now, when you woke up your husband that next morning, your other two sons, being Colin and Dylan, they were at home still?
Yes, they were at home still asleep.
And with regard to when you went to Fairview, came back with your husband, went back to Fairview, and then came back again, were they still asleep?
I don't remember.
You recall, well, let me put it this way. As far as your sons, did either of your sons come back with you to Fairview Road that day?
No, they did not.
And do you recall whether or not either Colin or Dylan was awake when you left the second time to go to Fairview?
I don't.
At some point, a few days after this, did you have occasion to meet with a couple troopers from the state police?
Yes, I did. They came to my home.
And when you say they, how many of them did you?
There were two.
And you spoke to them that day in reference to what you had observed at the waterfall, everything you just talked about.
Yes, I did.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Just one last question. When you came over to Fairview Road that first time with the donuts, as far as the inside of the house, what anything did you observe as far as the condition of the home or anything about the home that seems abnormal or out of place or off, the evening before when you were there? Nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay, Minetti?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Albert.
Good afternoon.
You and I have never met, correct? I just wanted to pick up on a question that, in an answer that Mr. Lally asked you and that you responded to. He had just asked you whether or not a few days later you spoke with a couple of state troopers. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
And your answer was yes?
Yes.
You would agree with me that it was more than just a few days later, correct? February 10th of 2022, that two state troopers came to speak with you and your husband, Chris, correct?
Correct.
And we're talking about 13 days later, almost 2 weeks later, correct?
If that was the date, yes, correct.
Prior to February 10th, no investigator from this case bothered to you or your husband, correct?
Correct.
Now, in terms of the two investigators who did come, you know them quite well, did you not?
I knew them. I wouldn't say quite well, but I knew them.
Okay, when you say knew them,
Him. I'm sorry, him.
okay. And who was it that you knew?
Michael Proctor.
Michael Proctor, the brother of one of your close friends, correct?
Correct.
Close with Courtney Proctor, correct?
I am.
And by the way, your maiden name is Daniels, correct?
Yes, it is.
And you have a sister, Jill Daniels, correct?
Yes, I do.
And you would agree that Jill Daniels is also lifelong best friends with Courtney Proctor, correct?
Yes, she is.
And in terms of your relationship with Courtney Proctor, you socialize with her, do you not?
Objection.
Do you?
Occasionally, yes.
Go out for drinks with her, correct?
Yes.
You've attended parties with her, correct?
Yes.
You've also provided childcare for her children, correct?
Yes.
Objection. Move to strike.
So, Ms. Albert, you provided childcare for Courtney Proctor's children.
Objection.
You need a time frame, Mr. Stephen.
Have you ever provided childcare for Courtney Proctor's children?
Objection.
So you need a time frame.
Before of 2022, did you provide childcare for Courtney Proctor's children?
Yes.
When?
2019.
1 year?
Yeah, it was COVID. And then when COVID happened and everything shut down, I wasn't helping her any longer. And then occasionally after, I would help just on an as needed basis after COVID.
And during that year of 2019, how often did you watch her children?
2 days a week.
And she had a boy and a girl?
Correct.
What were their names?
Jack and Caroline.
And Jack and Caroline were Trooper Proctor's niece and nephew, correct?
Yes.
The Proctor trusted you with the care of their children, correct?
Objection.
It's sustained as asked.
You know that Michael Proctor is a state trooper, correct?
Yes.
You knew that he also was from Canton?
Yes.
You knew his wife, Elizabeth Proctor?
Yes.
And you were also aware that Courtney Proctor had recommended you to also watch Michael.
Embrace your power. Intimissimi, the new Silky Intimates.
Objection.
Sustained.
Your son was a ring bearer at that wedding.
Objection.
Right, so we'll sustain that through this witness.
You've spent at Michael Proctor's childhood home, have you not?
Yes.
You've been to the pool at the Proctor's house, correct?
Yes.
May we approach? How many times have you been to the Proctor's pool?
Say maybe a dozen.
And you've certainly taken your children there as well?
Yes.
Colin has been to the Proctor's pool?
Yes.
And you've seen Michael Proctor's mother and father at that pool, correct?
Yes.
You've seen Courtney Proctor and her husband at that pool, correct?
Yes.
You are very close with Courtney Proctor, correct?
How would you define very?
Well, I guess I'd ask you to define very close. Do you think you were very close with Courtney Proctor?
No, what?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, go ahead, next question. You got your answer.
I didn't hear the answer.
Go ahead, repeat that.
Do you deny that you were very close with Courtney Proctor?
No.
Okay. You talk regularly, correct?
Yes.
Each other, correct?
Yes.
You also talk by phone.
Very rarely.
Is it fair to say very rarely you talk to
Phone.
Courtney Proctor by
Usually it's text.
But you stand by that testimony that you talk to Courtney Proctor very rarely by phone?
Do we have a time frame? Do you mean now or do you mean then?
Let me ask you this. Between February 1st of 2022 and September 6th of 2022, did you only speak rarely with Courtney Proctor?
I don't recall.
Were you using Courtney Proctor as an intermediary to communicate with Michael Proctor about this case?
Objection.
No, I was not.
Are you aware that between February 1st of 2022 and September 6th of 2022, you and Courtney Proctor spoke by phone 67 times?
Objection.
Were you aware of that?
No, I don't know the exact count.
Do you deny that you spoke 67 times?
I don't deny it, but I don't recall the exact times.
Okay, so you don't deny that you 67 times. You still want to maintain your testimony that you only talked very rarely with Courtney Proctor during that time period.
I just don't remember the exact amount of times.
Well, you know that my client, Karen Read, was arrested in connection with this case on February 1st of 2022, do you not?
I do.
You spoke to Courtney Proctor that date for 12 minutes by phone, correct?
I don't recall exactly. I don't remember exactly.
May I approach?
Sure.
Before I approach, your memory is exhausted to whether you spoke to Courtney Proctor that day, and if so, how long the two of you spoke?
Yes.
I'm showing you a document with a number of,
Just show it to us.
right, no, I just wanted to point out which one that I'm pointing out. So the third, I was going to say a number of lines. The third line down, if you would take a look at that date and time and see if that refreshes your memory about whether and how long you spoke to Courtney Proctor on February 1st, 2022.
Can you see that or do you need glasses?
No, I can see it.
I do have a pair of readers that I need as well if you need to borrow them.
Yes, if I could.
Of course.
Thank you. I
And,
left mine
I-
downstairs.
I just got these and it's like. the
Misty and
middle-
Eddie, just bring them up,
Sorry.
please.
It took me a while to figure them out, but anyway.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's the third line.
Third
down.
line down. Yes, I see it. I don't recall this.
Okay.
This one.
And you say, having seen this record, it does not refresh your memory that you spoke to Courtney Proctor for,
Don't, it does not refresh your memory, that's what you have.
did Courtney Proctor tell you the day of my client's arrest on February 1st that she had been the case with her brother that day?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you speak to Courtney Proctor that day in any fashion?
What day exactly?
The day of my client's arrest on February 1st of 2022.
That was on the sheet you just gave me?
It was.
Well, I did, obviously, if it was on that sheet.
And when you talked to her, did she tell you that she had discussed the case with her brother?
Objection.
Sustained.
Were you notified that Karen was going to be arrested?
Objection.
Sustained.
What did you discuss?
I don't recall.
The next day, February 2nd of 2022, was the day that my client was back in Stoughton District Court. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
You spoke to Courtney Proctor 3 times that day before my client's publicly televised arraignment at 9 a.m. Did you not?
Again, I don't remember.
After the arraignment, you spoke to her again for 27 minutes, beginning at 10:58 a.m. Did you not?
I don't recall.
Okay. So your testimony is, well, strike that. My client's arrest was pretty big in Massachusetts, wasn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
You were aware that my client had been arrested, correct?
Yes, I had seen it on the news.
You were aware that she was being arraigned the very next day, were you not?
Yes.
This case involved your family, did it not?
How do you mean it?
Well, you knew that John O'Keefe was found dead on your brother-in-law, Brian Albert's lawn, correct?
Correct.
So necessarily, your family was involved in this case, correct?
Somewhat, yes.
And knew that ultimately you'd probably be talked to by investigators from this case, correct?
I assume so, yes.
Right. Didn't happen for 13 days, but ultimately they did come, correct?
Yes.
So this case had to have been pretty big news within the Albert family, did it not?
Well, yes. Yes.
You were discussing it with your husband, correct?
Yes.
You were discussing it with your other relatives, correct?
Yes.
You were discussing it with your friends, correct?
I don't know about my friends, but yeah.
So is it your testimony that with all of this going on, you consider discussions about this case just to your specific family members?
Not necessarily.
No, I mean, clearly, you would have talked to Courtney Proctor about this, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. So before we end here, right, there's please do not just with anyone, don't do any independent research or investigation. Please disregard it and let us know. I'll see counsel to talk about all the jurors. Thank you very much.
Jurors is closing your notebooks and leaving.
See you tomorrow morning.